Good evening, welcome to TDM Talk Show. My name is Kelsey Wilhelm. Our guest tonight is Professor Glenn McCartney. He's had his finger on the pulse of Macau's gaming industry since before the industry's liberalization in 2001. An expert in integrated resorts, he's worked with the local government as well as consulting with the ASAR's top gaming operators, both prior to and since opening their multi-billion-dollar properties. And as the casino industry begins to look further beyond Macau, he's already one step ahead. Good evening, thanks for being here.
Kelly. Thanks.
So we're here and we're in the middle of Golden Week.
Yes.
And we have obviously lots of movement happening, and there's a lot of estimations and a lot of guesswork as to how many people we have so far. So we know that we've had at least 400-something thousand people in the door so far. Do you think that we're going to keep seeing such strong push in terms of visitation?
I do think so. Historical trends show it, and the government's predictions, which I agree with. I think we could be meeting nearly 950 million, by the end, double what you're saying today by the end of Golden Week. But coming back to the point you made at the beginning of the show, when we go back 20 years ago after the liberalization, we were single-digit reliability on the China market. Today, we're 65 to 70%. So again, another statistic is we become increasingly reliant on the mainland China market for visitation to Macau. So those two factors play a part of it.
Yeah, of those nearly 500,000 visitors that we had so far, 85% are from the mainland. And we see that not only on the casino floor, but also within the integrated resort sphere as well. Now, we're hopefully, the key word is diversifying. And that also would ideally mean that we can bring in more markets. But are we going to see more visitation from, say, further abroad? Long-haul visitation, more people. We saw actually a dropping number of South Korean visitors to Macau recently. Do you think that there will be a way to compensate with more of the long-haul visitation?
Well, I think in the short to medium term, the direct answer would be no, because we really are very much driven by the mainland China market, and the focus, for example, IRs and so forth, is mainland China. That's where your business is getting it from. And over the last 15, 20 years, we've become reliant on the China market. And I think I've said it time and time again, there's some obstacles and some that we have to overcome before we can actually say we're going to be even getting more regional or even beyond that travelers to Macau. We have the issues of physical infrastructure. I've always said Macau's brand image and how it's portrayed internationally. These are obstacles to getting more international visitors to Macau. So I think I have also mentioned other things about the private sector's drive as well, and how we collaborate with the public sector. So I think until we get some of these issues, we get a strategy, a common strategy, a tourism plan, 5, 10, 15 years about where our direction will be for Macau, how do we position ourselves, how do we communicate ourselves, how do we go to market, how do we go to Europe and even Australia and all the Asia-Pacific regions. I think we're still going to be very much reliant on the China market.
We actually, we had the director of the Macau Government Tourism Office on this show as well to speak more about how they were using the gastronomy angle and trying to do specifically to diversify a bit more of Macau's image. But it does seem like we will continue down the same avenue with reliance on the China market just because of a physical border. Now, even improving the infrastructure might still mean that we're only going to have more Chinese visitors circulating through the city.
Yeah, with gastronomy, every city around the world tries to get a few attributes, where it be fashion. We are the city of fashion, the city of romance, the city of cuisine. But if you're gonna play on a particular theme, you have to present it in a very believable, valid manner. So, for example, gastronomy, I think it's a fantastic play because many places around the world, many people are motivated by food. Some cities, they go specifically for a food or specifically for a drink. Japan, for example, is one of those markets, which we'll probably talk about later. But the problem with gastronomy is there's so many touch points, where be the restaurant that are the value chains to get the food there, the menu, the chefs, how they presented, the pricing, the quality. So there's so many of those things that have to be monitored and patrolled. So, and I've been to restaurants throughout Macau, and sometimes the service delivery, the pricing structure, it fluctuates. So if we are going to present Macau as a city of gastronomy, then how does the local restaurants on board, and how does the IR restaurants on board? So there's a lot of moving parts, and it's more complex than saying we can say whatever we want to say, but at the end of the day is how does the international regional audiences pick up on that? And so it is a very welcoming statement, but I still think we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, there are a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of different palettes. but we still have a focused, concentrated group of people with a dedicated palate, which will mainly be Chinese cuisine.
That's right.
Do you think that from what you've seen of the restaurant selection so far, are the Chinese restaurants getting more attention than some of their international counterparts?
But and why not? Chinese restaurants should be getting more of attention.
Definitely.
It's 70% of visitation to Macau, for multiple regions around provinces around China.
Fujian in particular.
IRs are actively going in and saying come to Macau, the non-gaming, and the gaming, of course, is one of the issues for people coming here. But also they have to, you know, where from north, west, east of China, you have to be able to cater for their palates as well. So it's very important. Chinese and the issues of food is extremely important. We know that as a very important variable of why Chinese particularly travel to certain destinations. It's the palate. So of course the IRs have, if you go to their properties, you'll see a mixture of Asian, Chinese cuisines, and that's not by chance. It's well researched and well thought out. So yes. Now the issue of Macau having a Macanese, Portuguese palate, that's another issue. Is how do you present that, for example, to the Chinese market as well? So and international markets. And coming back to my point, many moving parts that has to be presented at a very high level of quality and so forth. I think we still have a way to go.
Now, within the say Cotai sphere in particular, which is where most of the casinos are where most of the integrated resorts are concentrated, we saw that this year Macau underwent yet another natural disaster.
Yes.
We managed to recover very, very quickly, especially compared to the previous disaster that Macau faced, which was Typhoon Hato last August, 2017. Now, because Hato was so intense and so damaging and so internationally visible, and the recovery time was so long, do you think that we will have a similar type of reaction or kind of a knock-on effect from Mangkut, or do you think it'll be less intense?
Well, you know, I think we have recovered. I believe that's probably the better answer, because there was a lot of lessons learned without going into all the issues of the last typhoon, but certainly a lot of issues learned. We were ready, and people were drilled, and so forth, and the government's reaction and the industry's reaction and so forth. So our action was matter within a few days. The recovery was done almost. So we were back to normal almost. That was an excellent job. It was a portrayal, the perception portrayal into China and so forth gave a lot of consumer confidence, and Macau has recovered. So we're not like still waiting for a recovery. I think it's very much forgotten, and as you can see by the numbers in Golden Week, it's very much not in people's minds.
Yes, it was very, very quick to recover. We had boats literally in the streets. We had jet skis. We had, and this year we did not call on the PLA to come in, which, in terms of a vote of confidence, definitely has to make us look better internationally.
Yes, yes.
But this was also the first time ever that Macau saw a closure of its casinos due to a typhoon.
Yes.
In terms of perception, in terms of consumer confidence, which side of the scale would that be on? Would that be more be building confidence, or?
I don't think there's a good or a bad issue. It was done. It was a cautious issue done, and I didn't see any negative sentiment towards it. I'm sure the players were inconvenienced for a while. They were stuck on property, but they were reopened and everything's back to normal. And I think any type of negative sentiment, the inability to gamble, would have passed fairly, very fast. The sort of blip in the curve where that loss will be, if not already, made up. So I don't think it is as a bad or a good thing. I don't think there's any type of prolonged negative sentiment towards that closure.
So we did find that after Hato, people did come together, not only the community itself, but there was quite a bit of CSR work, a lot of outreach, a lot of help. That doesn't seem to limit itself just to post-disaster events. Do you see that also within, let's say, long-term training and trying to develop the talent within these IRs? You
see, with any tourism development around the world, whether it be integrated resorts or any type of large tourism setup, then the private sector should engage with the community. That's part of it. It's called the triple bottom line: the community, environment, and making it a viable business. So the community are part of it. And I can see there's been lots of benefits in terms of career, job creation, and then also goes on to other factors of helping the community out in many ways. And of course, we mentioned the car parks. I think these are just small elements of what the IR industry have been doing anyway over a longer period of time. It's part of corporate social responsibility too, which is now part of a global trend with international companies that are in the stock market and so forth. They have to be doing this type of checking that they're treating their employees correctly, even where do you buy all your local produce and so forth. So these things are becoming more and more part of the corporate social responsibility, even down to recycling, that you're doing green events, that your convention has a very low carbon footprint. So these things are all becoming factors in the hospitality industry.
And in terms of the talent itself, we do have a couple different institutions which are developing talent to then kind of feed into the IR.
Yes.
But there could be a problem of retention. People switching, let's say, every 2 years between a company because of better benefits, better salary. Is there any way of combating that and keeping people there at each individual IR? Is that a part of corporate identity, or is that a part of training?
Of course, there's many elements about why people stay in a job, and it's not necessarily the salary. You mentioned, for example, branding. You know, the branding, and it's called internal branding of a company, where you feel proud to be part of that brand and wear the logo. And so that keeps you in the company, your type of leadership that you have, the corporate culture you have, the organizational culture, all these elements that people feed in their mind, job security and benefits, of course. It depends where you're at in the hierarchical structure too. If you're very senior, maybe different these issues become more important to you. If you're very junior, and other things become important. So there's a lot of reasons why people would stay in IRs. There's been a lot of job jumping around because Macau has a very low unemployment rate. And so particularly if you're a Macau local, you have a lot of opportunity to, for example, have a lot of career potential and accelerate probably more so than any other places around the world in terms of going up that career ladder.
And there's also further training, continued education, which is happening, which is good, because Macau does not have all of the requirements. It hasn't had typically, even though this industry has been in Macau for so long, that doesn't mean that the training requirements of every aspect of it, such as event management, have always been.
When I started 20 years ago researching this industry, there was very little literature to go on, very little research, and still there really is. Me and a few colleagues were trying to build up the body of research literature. I teach postgrads as well, and again, we always talk about an international city is also an intellectual city. Where you have a level of intellectual, your own corporate intellectual, which means you're building your own library, not relying on somebody else's library. So in terms of Macau, we still have a way to go. It's not just about frontline. And there's issues where all the dealers are from locals, and we have a lot of frontline local, but we're also trying to get local people engaged in graduate and postgraduate study, which is it's very important to have a city that we are all research inclined, evaluation inclined, that we're always quite, this is very important for a city to say why are we doing it, how we're doing it, and therefore maybe some of the difficulties we've been getting into the last 2 decades, that we're going to have this new generation coming out with a lot more critique and thought about how we do things.
Because we have, liberalized in 2001, we're 17 years in. It's been a long road so far. We should start seeing not only the next generation, but also the generation following that, who have already moved up the ladder, who are starting to take the reins. It'll be interesting to see how Macau progresses further from that.
We certainly, from all my local postgrad classes and all the younger students who are all Macau people, understand the issues. We're able to critique it in the classroom. We actually have some solutions, but again, they're going to have to be put into positions later on in order to instill all of that we actually know, and the rhetoric we have and the debate that we have in our classroom structure. So I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see the debate. I'm glad to see they're looking for solutions and so forth. So I hope that they are given a chance in the years to come, in the very near distant future, that some of these people can be slotted into various departments and then start making some of these strategic changes that will benefit Macau.
Now, in terms of retention of labor, obviously there's a lot of job jumping within Macau, but do you see a lot of people jumping from an IR in Macau to an IR outside of Macau?
Not really. This is not a trend. Some do go to the Philippines, some do go to Singapore, but for the vast majority, it's not a leaving Macau issue.
But there is one primary focus that everybody is looking at, everybody from the operators to the government to the potential employees, and that is Japan.
Yes.
that is undeniably, I mean, Lawrence Ho has been very, very vocal that it is the jewel of his eye. They're very different markets.
Yes.
But do you think I know it's a very broad question, but will the Japanese market, the Japanese IR market, ever be, let's say, the same or have some of the same characteristics as Macau?
It's at this stage is all conceptual. We're all looking at what Singapore does, Macau does, Las Vegas. We always put these into the mix and say, what is the Japanese model? And of course, I've been to Japan and I've been doing some research and giving some trainings in Japan and talking to the Japanese business and academia on the topic of what will your IR look at and how will your market develop. There's a lot of guesstimation there. We just know it's going to be big, and I've seen the numbers presented too. It could be the second largest gaming market in the world in terms of gaming revenues and so forth, because after Macau. We just don't simply know, because it's just going to be initially three IRs in 3 different locations. How this plays out, and is also as a test as well for the Japanese government. As you say, the licenses are a short period of time, giving them a time to look at how does this model work out, and then after that period of time, the 10 years, could we then even go bigger? So I think there's also a cautious approach to how the Japanese are going to be doing it. But also, there's going to be a level of economic success, obviously, in the numbers. But then I think they're going to be testing policies, procedures, legislation, and so forth, very cautious. And I think that period of time will be a very testing point with them. And also working with international, the few that will get the license to work in those cities, they'll also see how this framework works out.
Now, you do mention something that's very, very interesting in an article that you co-author with Professor Toru Mihara of Osaka University of Commerce that is going to be in Gaming Law Review, which is coming out very soon.
Yes.
There is a very, very interesting point that I saw here in which there's no defined percentage so far of Japanese shareholding in the companies that will be one of the 3, any of the 3 operators within Japan. Is that a wait-and-see tactic? Is it kind of implicit that there will have to be Japanese shareholders within the companies? What are the advantages of that?
The legal eagle in this one was Professor Mihara, and I was mostly on the Macau, Singapore side as we put this analysing the IR bill of Japan, and we took it apart and dissected and find out. And of course, like you say, there's no definitive what the shareholding policy is. Now, what does that mean? I mean, I think in terms of how Macau and Singapore are entering the market, there will have to be a local shareholder in Japan. Now, what the shareholding is and how it's negotiated between the international partner and the local partner, but how I think getting into the Japanese market and understanding the Japanese market and understanding the culture and the marketing, of course, the partnership way is the best way.
Yes.
Now, how each entity wishes how to dissect the pie it'll be between the operators.
And it's a very, very different model from Macau, because they have it's a 10-year integrated resort license, which is at the national level. Yes. And then it's a 3-year casino license, which is at the provincial level, which is at the provincial level. So that's very different from Macau. That opens the door for a potential expansion, maybe in 10 years?
Of course, as I mentioned before, it's a short period of time in terms of how the gaming industry is run, get these things open and get them and built up and opened. So it is a short period of time, and I guess within that time period, the Japanese authorities, the federal or the local, will be able to assess and readjust, because they're not locked into 20, 30 years. They're locked into a shorter framework of time. So within that, they're able to make some adjustments and assessments by the end.
And they've been very strong in terms of saying that it's not going to be a similar case of Macau, where it's concessions and sub-concessions.
Absolutely. In my travels to Japan, it's been very adamant, it's almost in bold. It's like, it'll be 3 concessions, there'll be absolutely no sub-concessions, the law's very clear on it, and it'll be 3 locations like this. So we will see then. in that
But
regard.
because of that, that also means that we won't be able to create a synergy-like effect, which even in terms of infrastructure can be a good thing for integrated resorts, similar to the Las Vegas Strip or the Macau Strip. I know that here they were pushing to have more of an interlinking between the various properties, which can not only drives customer flow,
Yes.
but can increase visitation and entertainment. That means we won't be able to have something like that.
You know,
Yes.
I've studied every most models of how IRs can work, or how tourism destinations work, and you have strips of things and you have isolated pockets of things, and in our paper we say it's very important that they're connected to the grid, which in terms of I've seen levels of failure in tourism where, or particularly in casino type tourism, where they really are dispensed from the grid far away, and they're still saying, please be the golden egg and make money for us, but you've actually isolated them, but there's expectation for them to make money. But that's not the way to treat the gaming industry, particularly in IR, which has, you know, it's going to be a lot of non-gaming features in Japan. It's going to be really much, that's going to be the emphasis. So the connectivity of these IRs within, in terms of like access into the grid of the cityscape is very, very important, not to be disconnected. Now, so I foresee that's going to be very much part of their success, that they're not isolated properties, they're part of airport access, getting there on the road systems, rail systems, and into the local city grid.
And that's something that Macau, despite being so small, is having a slight disconnect with. We're still waiting for the LRT to come online. In particular, through Cotai, the construction in and of itself blocked much of the access in between casinos themselves. But the Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge also could be opening up a new possibility for that.
Again, there's a level of speculation. I also said at the time we should be scenario planning A, B, and C, and D on terms of one issues I'd like to see more about is in the scenario planning is carrying capacity issues and the physical numbers of traffic that we can take into Macau. I've been walking around Golden Week here. There's a lot of people. That in itself it's not about numbers, and I've said time and time again, it's like we're talking about 1 million people at the end of the week coming into Macau. It's how that translates into spend, not just in the gaming floor, but non-gaming. We talk about non-gaming spend, and in terms of not just hotel spend, and we're talking beyond the comp, because many of these rooms are comped this week to the casinos, right? But what about leisure sales? What about F&B sales? What about retail sales? What about event and entertainment sales? What about the local companies, local small and business enterprises? How did this fare for them? So if you've got a day tripper coming here for 3 or 4 hours and following around and just going to a few locations and back over the border, they become a tick in the box, and they're like but that is not a celebratory number in terms of like you've really had a lot of benefit from Macau. It's a traffic number, but it's like how they came to Macau. So for far too long, for the last 2 decades, we talk about the numbers, but we don't look beyond the numbers in terms of how long did you stay? What made you stay longer? And how could we make you stay longer? So we're still talking about we're going to have so many numbers. So we have to move beyond that rhetoric into the other rhetoric, going like, so what indicators could make you stay longer here in Macau? Was it the gastronomy that we're pitching, or would there be other things that could be a factor to make you stay one more night and not pop back to Zhuhai, where there's hundreds of hotels there too, and the offers are of course lower. So we have to really, it comes down to, when we talk about the bridge, the carrying capacity issues, bringing more people is not the solution for Macau. Bringing in terms of, you know, I talk about brand image. You know, there's nothing wrong about putting the brand image. Macau is affordable, but actually you're going to have to spend money to be here, you know, on the Cotai Strip. You know, there's good retail, but you're going to have to spend money on. So there's a lot of destinations around the world that are called not pricey. You go to like, let's say, European cities. People expect to spend money. The wallet, you know. So we have to think about that in the longer term about Macau. If we want more people to stay, and they will pay. The tourists will pay.
Yeah.
But
we have the statistics to back that up.
Yes.
The average MICE visitor spends 3 times as much as the typical day tripper. So.
Yeah, but we still haven't. We still got like 1 or 2% of all total revenues based on the MICE trade. So we still have a way to go there too. Why are we not attracting the conventioneer to Macau? Again, comes back to the brand image. We have to compete with Hong Kong. We have to compete with Singapore. There's a lot of regional competition. So Macau, we can go out and say we're a MICE destination. I've seen the posters, but is that convincing the convention organisers, the ones who bring the trade shows? That's one of the issues. And we'll come back to again about labour as well, about the issues like we talked about, you mentioned about the career. But one of the issues, we need quality, and quality is so versatile. Some cities around the world, we go there and they're like, wow, the service was great and so forth. Our people, it's volatile. So it's how can we manage Macau's service delivery? So during this Golden Week, lots of people, but how I was coming here too, and I can see the buses, they're packed. How do local people feel and how do visitors feel about that experience? So again, not about the numbers, it's about the experiences, both of locals and also of the people who come here to visit.
Going back to Japan, just to kind of another separating point that we see in Singapore, but we don't see in Macau, is there's no tax on people, on locals going into gamble. However, there will be a 6,000 yen tax for Japanese citizens for casinos. You're much more familiar with Singapore than I am. Are there many people in the casinos? Did it seem like there are many local people in the Singaporean casinos?
Yeah, of course Singaporeans go to Singapore casinos and Japanese will go to Japanese casinos. The issue about a levy, is the government's perception of a levy is if you can't afford to gamble, then you can't afford the levy. And we put the discussion very much into our piece as well, because there's a few perspectives of a levy. I mean, if you do charge somebody to go in, they may stay there longer because they just paid to get in.
And they might want to try and get their money back.
And then there's that issue too. So I have actually strongly said in our piece there that this is something Japan wanted to copy the Singapore model of the levy. So, and this is the same, and the parties in Japan came to a compromise of what the levy would be. So now we strongly recommend watching how that plays out. People will have to register, so you'll be able to tell them how many times they're going to the casino, and so you can watch
once a month, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or there's a limit of how many times you can enter per month in the casino. Is that only for Japanese citizens, or is that also extended to visitors?
No, that's Japanese.
Okay.
So they will have a card called My Name Card, which will be, it's in the IR legislation. But again, it's a very low pickup. I think in our paper we mentioned 11-12% of Japanese have it. So how the Japanese government will encourage people to register for this. They are to go and collect their card in the government so they can, this is how they'll get in and be monitored coming in and out of the casinos.
That could be a dissuasive effect in and of itself, just having to register to go into the casino.
Well, Singaporeans have to do it, and it's a way the government can keep an eye on how many times you're going in a year and so forth. But oversight is one thing. I mean, in Singapore, Singaporeans can go to Malaysia and they can gamble in Malaysia without the oversight. So in Japan, of course, there's going to be that level but will it stop the gambling amounts in the casino? Of course not. Of course not. So you have to really watch and see how that levy.
And in terms of perception, there's the current style of gambling in Japan is almost completely limited to pachinko parlors. Yes. So do you think that the current understanding of what gambling is could maybe go through an evolution based upon these IRs coming in and showing a non-gaming side, a more luxurious side?
Absolutely. And in our paper we mentioned about the IR, providing all these non-gaming and entertainment and so forth. I mean, if you go to Japan, they're omnipresent, these pachinko parlors throughout, and they offer very little in terms of benefits, in terms of tourism and so forth, because it's omnipresent. So, and I've read some, how people view IRs when I read these researches, but perhaps I haven't read the methodology, but perhaps people's perception is it's a pachinko parlor. So I'd like to see how they understand the concept of what an integrated resort is. Within this whole building, you have a lot of non-gaming entertainment, events, and retail, and so forth. So absolutely, the IR is the way to go in terms of, sure, there's going to be gaming within it, but of course you've got all these other benefits. The pachinko parlor is very limited beyond just the gaming component.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see how the integrated resorts evolve in Japan and who actually manages to get in to those three places. Well,
it's only going to be a few, and there's going to be a lot of people bidding. There's going to be some very, very happy, a few happy, and maybe many unhappy. So we'll see how this is going to be played out the next year or two. Everybody over there lobbying and pitching and seeing who will eventually end up with the IR license.
And we know who to go to ask for information about it.
Oh, well.
Professor, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
So we can see that although Macau has a very developed casino industry and integrated resort industry, we'll see what can develop in Japan with many, many people, both from Macau, from the United States, and further abroad, intent to see what can happen and who will get the 3 spots. That's all for this evening. Thank you. My name is Kelsey Wilhelm.